Hang Gliding Flight School is a free educational resource created to share the fun and adventure of flying by encouraging, teaching, and inspiring aviators of all ages. Aviation videos provide a supplement, never a replacement, for face-to-face, in-person training with qualified teachers. Visit www.hangglidingflightschool.com for a map of nearly 40 flight instructors in the USA.
Before you learn how to run off of a mountain like this with a hang glider all by yourself, the first thing that you need to know is how to do this on a training hill, which is still a heck of a lot of fun and way less intimidating. This is how you start to foot launch hang gliders on training hills, not mountains. Now, this process of launching a hang glider is called aero towing, where you're getting pulled across a field by an ultralight all by yourself. When you reach an altitude of about 2,500 feet, you hit a release lever, the tow line drops away, and you get to fly around all on your own. But again, this is the way you start to learn that, with an instructor by your side who'll show you how it's done.
Good day, aviators, and welcome to another episode of Hang Gliding Flight School. My name is Eric, and this episode of Hang Gliding Flight School is going to teach you the basics of how to start hang gliding. Many potential pilots often struggle to understand the easiest way to begin the process of getting trained and buying their first hang glider. I mean, where do you go? Who do you talk to? Do you need a license? How much does it cost? And how long does it take to do all the training? This video will explain everything you need to do and answer all of those questions. Plus, I will detail a simple 7-step process to becoming a pilot. Before I explain those 7 steps in more detail, let's answer those primary 3 questions that most aspiring pilots have. How much does it cost? Do you need a license? And how long does it take? First, how much does it cost? Well, the cost can vary greatly. Some training schools, like Wind Sports here in California, they have an apprenticeship program, so you can actually train for free in exchange for assisting with instructors. Depending on the options offered by the schools and dealers around you, it can be very affordable or a little more expensive.
There are really 2 sets of costs. First is the initial training and lessons, and second is the equipment and gear you'll need after you become a certified pilot. So first, let's look at training costs. If you're just a tourist looking to take one tandem flight on your birthday or spend an afternoon foot launching on a training hill, that might cost you $150 to $200 and you're done. If you want a foot launch certification and you need around 15 lessons at $160 each, it will cost around $2,400. Now, keep in mind, you'll take around 3 to 10 flights per lesson. And again, this is just a generalization. Different schools will have different policies. Some give you more flights, some give you less. This just serves as guidelines to help you understand what you get from most instructors. Now, if you're learning to aero tow and you need around 25 lessons at $120 each, it will cost around $3,000. If you get into an apprenticeship program, all of this could be free of charge. Now, let's take a look at equipment costs once you finish your training and become a certified pilot. At a bare minimum, you'll need a hang glider and a harness. Here are the costs if you rent that equipment, buy it used, or purchase it brand new. And again, all these prices are just estimates. You may need more lessons or fewer lessons than average. Different schools and gliders and harnesses may cost a little more or less. And remember, you won't be paying for this all at once. Most schools allow you to pay for lessons one at a time. Plus, it will probably be months before you purchase your equipment. These expenses will likely be spread out over 6 months to a year. Now, if you have ever asked a hang glider pilot, how much does it cost to start hang gliding, and they never give you a direct answer, now you understand why. Pilots struggle to answer questions about price because there are a lot of variables. You may join a free apprenticeship program and rent gliders for $100 a day. You may pay for foot launch lessons, then buy a used glider and harness, so it will cost a little over $3,700. You could buy a full aero-tow training program and purchase all new equipment and spend close to $10,000. It's not easy to tell people how much hang gliding costs because there are so many options. And how old can your hang glider be, right? That's another good question about price. Like, how long does a hang glider last? Do they wear out, or do you have to replace them? Well, the bad news is yes, eventually the ultraviolet damage done to the sail will make the sail weak and it will need to be replaced. But the good news is hang gliders can actually last about 15 to 20 years before you need to do that replacement.
When you compare hang gliding to other action sports, like surfing, snowboarding, mountain biking, or skateboarding, yes, it's vastly more expensive. But when you compare hang gliding to other recreational investments like traditional aviation, boating, or motorcycling, it becomes vastly more affordable. So, justifying the expense is really a matter of adjusting your mindset, changing your viewpoint. Hang gliding is an action sport, but hang gliding is also a genuine form of aviation, and you are a legitimate pilot of an aircraft. When you realize that you are training to be a pilot and to own an aircraft, the costs suddenly become far more reasonable. And that is a good segue into the next question. Do you need a license to fly a hang glider? Well, yes and no. See, this gets a little complicated. So technically, no. From a legal standpoint, there are no federal or state laws which require that you have a license to pilot a hang glider. Regulation 103.7, paragraph B of the Federal Aviation Administration specifically states an airman piloting ultralight aircraft is exempt from any certification requirements. However, there's a huge caveat to this. There is an independent nonprofit hang gliding advocacy organization in the United States called the United States Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association, or USHPA. And they have worked closely with the FAA to develop a skill ranking system for hang glider pilots. You may notice at the start of my videos, I include my USHPA member number, which can allow anyone to see my current skill ranking on the USHPA website. Now, most flying sites in the United States require that you have a particular skill ranking from the USHPA. More difficult and challenging sites require more advanced certifications. In addition, no hang glider dealers will sell you a new hang glider unless you can prove your ranking. If you tried to fly at a USHPA site without a ranking, you wouldn't be violating any aviation laws, but you could potentially be cited for trespassing, since the people in charge of that property wouldn't permit you to fly there without the proper USHPA certification. So, technically, no, you don't need a license. If you found a third party who is willing to sell you a used glider, and you found a public park with a hill and no laws against flying there, you could go out and teach yourself to fly. No license required. Obviously, I do not recommend that anyone ever does this, because it's extremely likely that you will literally kill yourself and possibly seriously injure someone else. Make sure you get proper training from an experienced instructor to become a hang glider pilot. No, you don't legally need a license to pilot a hang glider, but yes, you absolutely should get a license for safety reasons. So how long does it take to become a licensed pilot? Well, that depends on how the training is conducted. The two most common methods of launching a hang glider are foot launching by running down a training hill, or arrow towing, where you and your instructor are pulled into the air by an ultralight. Now, I have personally earned my beginner ranking in both foot launching and arrow towing, with a 22-year gap between my training. So I have a pretty good idea of how long each one takes. So most foot launch pilots require around 50 to 80 launches to earn their beginner ranking to fly solo on training hills. Now, you may need to triple that number before you're ready to fly off of a mountain. Most arrow tow pilots require around 25 to 35 launches to earn their beginner ranking and fly solo. Why is there such a big difference in the quantity of launches that you need? Well, arrow towing skills are learned faster because you have more consistent and predictable flying conditions. For example, you're always taking off into the wind at a set speed, whereas foot launching requires a pilot to be a lot more skilled at adapting to changing conditions like crosswinds, variations in wind speed, and running fast enough to get airborne. There's a lot more nuance and subtlety to foot launching, so it typically takes longer to refine those skills. Plus, you also have to remember, a short arrow tow flight lasts about 15 minutes, while a short foot launch flight on a training hill might last 10 seconds. So the amount of time that you spend in the air is immensely different. You develop your flying skills much faster with arrow towing, simply because you spend so much more time in the air for each launch. As for which type of training I recommend you take, well, you probably don't have much choice. You see, most mountainous regions don't offer arrow towing, and most flat landscapes don't offer foot launching. So the options available to you are primarily going to depend on your geography. If you live in Florida, you're arrow towing. If you live in California or Colorado, you're probably foot launching. You know, most of you won't have the opportunity to choose. It will simply depend on the terrain at your closest flight school.
I should note that there are some exceptions. For example, there is a flight park called Lookout Mountain in Georgia, which does offer foot launching and arrow towing. Plus, there's also a school in North Carolina called Kitty Hawk Kites, and they also offer both foot launching and arrow towing. So there are a few rare exceptions where you can learn how to fly a glider in both of those skill sets.
Now you know what it costs, you know that you should definitely get a license, and you know how long it will take to earn your license. So the only thing that remains is, how do you learn all this? What is the process? Well, that leads us back to the 7 steps you want to follow in order to become an adept and respected pilot.
Among those 7 steps, the first thing you want to do is find a good instructor in school. Second, take a tandem flight. Number 3, be very patient. Number 4, begin your lessons. 5 is earn your Hang 1 pilot rating. Number 6 is buy your first hang glider and harness. And 7 is keep practicing and training. So let's go over all 7 of those in more detail.
Find an instructor or school. The very first step to becoming a good pilot is to find a good teacher. Hang gliding schools and teachers will typically offer introductory lessons and introductory flights to allow you to decide if this is a sport you really want to pursue.
The best way to find a nearby instructor is to go to the Hang Gliding Flight School website at hangglidingflightschool.com and click on this link that says Map to Hang Gliding Instructors. And that will pull up a map of hang gliding schools and hang gliding clubs all around the world. Now, I can't promise that every single one of these schools and clubs is still in business, but they do have a functional website. I try very, very hard to keep this map up to date, and anytime I find new schools or new clubs, I end up adding them to the map. So the little yellow schoolhouse icons represent the schools, and the blue icons represent the clubs. And combined, in the United States alone, we have over 100 hang gliding schools and clubs, which is awesome because there is just so many resources for you to find an instructor. Now, you can come down to any of the icons and zoom in, and as you click on the icons, you notice over here on the left-hand side, it actually pulls up a link to that school or that club, so you can go to that website and get more details. And for those of you who are a little more internet savvy, you probably already know that you can click here and go to download KML, and you can actually download a KML file that you can import into your GPS. But what you might not know is that you can also come to the Documents and Books page on the Hang Gliding Flight School website, and if you scroll down to this Hang Gliding School Locations, you can also download KML, CSV, and XLS versions of that entire map. And one last note on the map is make sure that you do zoom in like really far on the map when you're looking for an instructor, because there are some flight parks that actually have multiple teachers, and you can't really tell if you're zoomed out really far on the map, but when you get a lot closer, you can see that there are actually multiple schools and multiple teachers at that location. Step 2 is to take a tandem flight. A tandem flight is done in an oversized hang glider, which provides enough lift to carry both you and an instructor at the same time. There are foot launch tandem gliders, as well as arrow tow tandem gliders. And booking a tandem flight should be the very first thing you do when learning to become a pilot. That way, you will get a taste for flying and understand what you are getting yourself into. Will you love it as much as you imagine, or will it scare you so much you never want to try again? You don't want to be like one of those people who spends $20,000 on a new motorcycle, only to discover you're too frightened to take it on a freeway. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't feel any fear or trepidation. If you're running off a cliff with a giant kite strapped to your back and you're not frightened at all, there's something wrong with you. You should be 90% thrilled and excited and about 10% nervous. As human beings, we all have a primal instinct in us which tells us, don't run off of a cliff. And that's, it's going to scare you a little bit, and you have to overcome this really primal fear. A little apprehension is okay. A little apprehension is to be expected. But if you're 90% horrified and only 10% joyful, then maybe this isn't the sport for you.
Number 3, be patient. I know what you're thinking. Being patient sounds like a good piece of advice, but not a step in the learning process. Well, here's the thing. Patience is so incredibly important that I listed it as one of the steps. Now, allow me to explain why patience is vital. So you remember earlier I said that foot launching may require 80 launches before you have your ranking, and arrow towing may be 30 launches. Well, obviously, you aren't going to reach that quantity of launches in one day, right? It can take weeks or even months before you build up those skills.
Can you fly that thing?
Not yet.
Operator.
Tank, I need a pilot program for a B-212.
Hang glider.
Hurry.
It would be awesome if we could learn hang gliding this quick, but until we can, we're just going to have to be patient.
Let's go.
You must also remember, the hang gliding industry is very small, right? There's no such thing as a hang glider showroom where you can walk into a dealership with 100 gliders and harnesses on sale. Hang gliders are handmade aircraft and can take weeks to build. And harnesses, they're custom fit to your body measurements, so they can also take weeks to manufacture. So as a new pilot who's all full of enthusiasm and excitement and eagerness to get your own gear and start flying, well, all these timelines can become really disappointing and frustrating. Pilots get discouraged because things take so much longer than they imagined. This is why I'm emphasizing the fact that being extremely patient is literally one of the steps in the training process. Along with that patience, you have to just fall in love with flying. You have to be so happy with flying that 150 flights on that training hill won't get boring. Even a 50-foot flight is still exhilarating. If you are starting to get bored on your 12th aerotow flight, you're not meant to be a pilot. But if you've launched off that training hill 180 times and you still look forward to doing it again, then you have found a passion which is meant for you. So just remember, you are in this for the long haul, okay? You want to be a hang glider pilot for the rest of your life. So if it takes 6 months to a year before you acquire all your gear and your training, it's okay. Remember to be patient. Patience is so vital. It is truly one of the steps in the learning process.
Step number 4, begin your lessons. Okay, you found your instructor, you experienced a tandem flight, and you're really excited and enthused to keep going. You understand the long timelines involved and will be patient with the learning process. So now it is finally time to start taking lessons. Now, many schools advise you take lessons over a period of successive days. That's not practical for most of us, so I would suggest you make sure you book a lesson at least once a week. Like any other skill, the more time you place between your lessons, the longer it will take and the harder it is to retain the knowledge you gain. So, the more often you train, the better. And if you're intimidated by the idea of foot launching a hang glider all by yourself, remember, your first flights are probably going to look a lot like this. You're only going to be a foot or two off the ground with an instructor by your side the whole time. It won't be until you decide that you feel comfortable that you'll be allowed to fly a little bit higher all on your own. So don't be intimidated, don't be freaked out. You're not going to be running off a mountain. You're going to be doing stuff like this.
Also, remember that teaching is a skill that most people never learn. Being experienced doesn't guarantee someone is capable of articulating and conveying their knowledge. Some talented pilots are terrible teachers. Some mediocre pilots are fantastic teachers. Some instructors are wonderful, kind, joyful, enthusiastic people who are deeply supportive and will emphasize and praise your improvements with positivity and encouragement. Other instructors are cynical, negative, relentlessly focused on everything you have done wrong, will ignore your fears and trepidations, give you inaccurate advice, and remain constantly focused on criticizing your mistakes while never complimenting the things you do correctly. If you have a crappy instructor and you don't have an option to get a different one, my advice is don't let them get to you. Your life is an adventure. You are the hero of the story of your life. You always have setbacks and disappointments. Are you really going to allow this bad teacher to steal away your dream of flying? No. No, you're not. You're going to do everything in your power to fight through those hardships, and you're going to learn to be a great hang glider pilot. A bad instructor? That's not an insurmountable obstacle. They are merely a temporary challenge to overcome. And if you're lucky enough to have an articulate, optimistic, upbeat, cheerful, wise instructor, well, then you're all set. Just have fun.
Step number 5, earn your Hang 1 pilot rating. Now, when you start flying, most schools will require that you join the United States Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association. As I mentioned earlier, the USHPA created a rating system to help standardize a way to measure the skill of hang glider pilots. The ratings are ranked as Hang 0 through Hang 5. Now, honestly, ratings serve no practical purpose other than allowing strangers to assess your skill level. So, if you travel to different geographic locations to fly, your fellow hang glider pilots will know if you have the proficiency and expertise to fly safely at their launch. Your rating is meaningless if you only fly one location. Because if you only fly in one location, everyone knows you, everyone knows your skill and abilities, and they trust you are a safe and mature aviator. And plus, most hang glider dealers won't sell you a glider unless you are at least a Hang 1. So that's why it's important to earn your Hang 1 rating, even if you don't bother to earn the others. Earning your Hang 1 lets us run to step 6, buying your first glider and harness. The three most common styles of hang gliders are single surface, double surface, and topless. Now, single surface gliders tend to be docile and manageable aircraft for beginners. Double surface gliders have more intermediate performance, while topless gliders are very sensitive, high-performance aircraft. So here are some of the best makes and models of single surface hang gliders for a beginner. First, we have the EZ, made by Northwing in the United States. Next is the Falcon 4, made by Wilswing. Wilswing was founded in the USA but moved to Mexico in 2022. Then we have the Alpha, also made by Wilswing, and it's a little larger than the Falcon. And finally, there is the Malibu 2, made by Moy's Delta Gliders in Australia. And those are really kind of the top 4 beginner gliders. Now, less popular beginner gliders are ones like the Icaro 2000 Puma, which is made in Italy. Then we have the Fex America Perfex, made in Germany, the La Moyette Sphinx, made in France, the Airborne F2, made in Australia, and the Avian Fly 15, made in the United Kingdom. If you come to the Hang Gliding Flight School website and you click on the link to Gear and Equipment, you will see this list of hang glider manufacturers where you can find out more details about any of their aircraft. Now, you can't just go to a hang glider manufacturer website and place an order for a hang glider and have it delivered directly to your house. It kind of works like purchasing a car or a motorcycle in that the manufacturers have a dealer network and you have to go through one of their dealers in order to purchase a hang glider. Now, you remember when I said earlier there's no such thing as a hang glider dealer that has 100 gliders in stock. But there are dealers that might have half a dozen. So if you come here to used gliders, you can see a few different hang glider dealers that have both new and used gliders in stock. So right here you can see these guys have a used Airborne, and they've also got a brand new Moy's Malibu 2. So just like going to a car dealership, you can order a car and have all the features and options and colors that you want, or you can buy a brand new car off the lot, but you'll have to stick with what it is that they have available. So the same thing works with a hang glider. You can buy a brand new hang glider that a dealer already has in stock. You are also going to need a harness for your hang glider. And there are 4 primary harness styles. First, we have a training harness. These are used in an upright flying position and have really minimal features. Next, we have a knee hanger harness. These are probably the most lightweight harnesses that are used in a prone flying position. After that, there is the cocoon harness. Cocoon harnesses have an open back, and there's a lot of cords that maintain the shape of the harness. And these are probably the most common harness styles for recreational flying. And then finally, we have a pod harness. And these completely enclose the pilot, are very aerodynamic, and they're usually only used by competition pilots or for very high altitude flights. Once again, if you go to the Gear and Equipment page on the Hang Gliding Flight School website, you can see a whole bunch of harness manufacturers. Now, just like a glider, you actually have to go through a dealer network in order to purchase a harness. But there is one exception to that rule, which is this company, GrayFit, which is based here in California. I personally own a couple of GrayFit harnesses, and the great thing about these guys is that you can actually place an order on their website and have it delivered directly to you instead of going through a dealer network.
And finally, the last step, step number 7, keep practicing and training, okay? Can you indulge me just for a moment? Just let me get a little preachy for a second, okay? Because, look, listen, 90% of hang glider pilots, they stop flying on training hills once they gain the skill to fly off of mountains. This is a terrible decision, okay? Never become one of those pilots. Be better than that, you know? Be among that rare 10% who keep practicing. No matter how many years you've been flying, no matter how skilled and adept you become, always go back to that training hill and get in a dozen launches and landings in an afternoon. You know, in other videos, I've mentioned that I also skateboard, I race BMX, and as a skateboarder, I know that I have to skate at least once a week to really keep my skills at their best. If I'm not dropping into a pool a dozen times a week, I start to get slower, I start to get kind of sketchy.
Years ago, I skated with this girl who was complaining that she couldn't really improve in her skating, and I told her, I said, you know, you skate like once a week. And she goes, yeah, I know. She's like, I skate so much. And I started laughing, and I said, no, I said, you totally missed my point. You only skate once a week. I said, you know, professional skaters skate every single day, and you have to skate a lot more if you really want to start improving.
And you know, in BMX, the tracks are open for practice for about 2 hours before each race. So even expert and professional BMX racers constantly practice over and over and over again before every race. I mean, do Olympic athletes stop training once they reach the Olympics? Right? Of course not. All athletes in every sport constantly practice to maintain and improve their skills. Hang gliding is no different. You need to keep practicing forever to keep your skill set honed. Hang glider pilots who never return to the training hill, they're never good pilots. And if you don't believe me, I challenge you to find some videos online of Hang 3, Hang 4 pilots flying in a competition. Watch the people who only fly once every 3 months, and you will see a majority of those pilots displaying awful form on launches and landings. You know, I once met a Hang 5 pilot who started flying 50 years ago, but he hadn't flown for an entire year. That person got on the training hill, and their first 2 or 3 launches were worse than the students. I mean, think of it this way. A Hang 3 with 10 years of experience who flies once a month only has 120 launches and landings. A Hang 1 with 1 year of experience who flies once a week, including 10 launches and landings on a training hill, has over 500 launches and landings. Which pilot do you think will have better form? You know, in the words of Indiana Jones,
it's not the years, it's the mileage.
So, respect your fellow pilots for their logbooks, not their calendars. And don't become one of those pilots who earns a Hang 3 or Hang 4 and suddenly you think you no longer need training hills. Athletes in other sports practice the fundamentals all the time. Hang glider pilots need to do the same thing. Be safe, be smart, and keep those skills sharp. There you have it, my fellow aviators. Now you know all the steps involved in getting started to fly. And I hope that you start really soon. You know, I've heard stories about a pilot who used to fly in Silmar, California, who was 86 years old. And everyone who knew this guy said that his launches were impeccable. Think about that. That means even if you're a 70-year-old lady, you could potentially have 16 years worth of flying ahead of you. It's never too late to start. If this is your dream, go make it happen. Thanks for watching this episode of Hang Gliding Flight School. Be sure to check the Hang Gliding Flight School website to find a map of nearby instructors who will train you to become a hang glider pilot. And remember, my friends, in the words of Ray Bradbury, you've got to jump off cliffs all the time and build your wings on the way down.